This week is a little bit weird because it's another holiday, and I wanted to get this done. Several people have been turning in their wrapped objects, and have had a difficult time understanding the assignment parameters. So I wanted to go over that, look at the things that have been turned in. And again, anything that's been turned in, you can return in. And I would advise very strongly that you do that in order to get good points, solid points on that. Everything but the wrapped object has been graded, so everything is up to date. And a couple more people, it looks like, have turned in their critiques. So I wanted to watch those and then talk about them. Since nobody else is on this call today, that'll be just fine. I'll do that and pretend that people are listening. One thing that I am noticing is that a lot of confusion about assignments or a lot of the redo that you have to do can be avoided if you watch the videos for that assignment, for that module that we're working on. You notice that very few things have been due last week and this week, and a big part of that is I want people to be finishing their PowerPoint videos and work on their final project. One person has done the final project, and I wanted to show that. I think they did a pretty good job, but it demonstrates the kind of work that you should be putting in. One thing that does concern me is looking at, I want to remind people that when you get full points for posting something, it doesn't mean that the thing that you're posting is being graded. It means that you're getting points for the posting. Another thing I want to remind people is that you can redo stuff, and it's perfectly fine to redo and rework stuff. It's a little concerning when, I guess the other thing I wanted to remind people is that when you get points for submitting your work log, you're getting points for submitting the work log, not for the work that you've done. So both for the work log and for the discussion, the points for posting are received for posting, and it's not an evaluation of what was posted. So be mindful of that. I think that there is a very strong correlation. If I ask you to redo some different things, a lot of the times the work log for that demonstrates that the person did not spend very much time on it. And each of these objects that you're making, I'm not expecting masterpieces, but I am expecting you to use your artistic ability that you've been honing for the last several years and do the best job you can. Apply the things that you've learned about craft making. Just the good work that you do in other classes, you need to apply for these objects. And there is always a one-to-one correspondence between the amount of time spent and the grade given. So if you turn something in and I say, well, it still needs to be sanded, that's a demonstration that a little bit more time should have been spent. If I'm saying that this wrapped object is not complete and you need to follow the parameters of the assignment, whether or not you're happy with what you've done, the important thing is that the parameters of the assignment need to be followed. Now you will notice that there is some odd things going on with the lack of fluidity with the video. I don't know what's going on with my computer. It seems rather jerky. I was able to work with Keaton and fix the whole connection with Teams so everybody can be on the Teams calls. But it looks like there's some other stuff going on, and it's a computer issue rather than anything else. I am going to go ahead and tee up a couple of the videos. Camden turned in a peer critique and a self-critique. I said last time that you would get extra credit turning it in before Pioneer Day. I think that if you want to turn it in, Camden was the only one that took me up on that, sadly. So after Wednesday, there's not going to be any more extra credit on it. You'll still need to do it. I would heartily recommend go and look at your grading and see where you stand. And there's a couple really easy things that you can do. Look at the zeros first. Turn in everything that you haven't turned in. The easiest thing, some of the easiest things to do are the attendance videos, and then each of the modules have essays that you need to write, and then also the work logs. Get those turned in. Now, this last week, I noticed that a couple of the essays that people wrote regarding contemporary processes, there is a list of artists. They're the numbered areas of those videos, and we'll go to that page to double check. And then also in your list of artists at the very beginning of the term, show you which artists you're supposed to be working from. And so if you use one of those artists and then pulled another one from somewhere else, you didn't get full credit. I was going to give zeros, but you did work a little bit. I would recommend, if you want to get full credit, go back and look at that list of artists and clarify that in just a moment. I think what I would like to do first is look at the two videos from Camden on the critiques. And then after that, we will look at the essays. So you can see exactly what I'm talking about regarding the artists. And then after that, we will go through the different objects that have been done. So I am just teeing up a couple of things here really quick. And as soon as I do that, we will get going. And again, I'm sorry for the jerky video. My computer is acting really odd, and I don't know exactly why. One other thing that I wanted to point out is that we do have videos an assignment up in the final section talking about your course review. There's no points associated with that, but if you do that, and we'll talk about that in just a second, if you choose to do that, you will get extra credit as well, and we will talk about that in just a minute. Sorry, again, going on. There's something weird going on where the mouse is moving in places that I'm not pointing at. And it seems to be, it seems that there's a little bit of a lag time from when I move the mouse to when it actually is showing up. The thing that was opened up is called the Student SRI. And the Student SRI is due at the end of the term. And we will talk about that in just a moment. So, all right, so I'm going to share my page so we can look at the critiques. Or ideally, that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, here you should see the video. I'm going to try to turn the video on. Okay, so we're sharing this tab. All right.
My name is Camden, and today I want to critique this piece by Camden. Right off the bat, I think we can all agree this is a very abstract piece. It definitely doesn't represent anything that we can see in real life or in our lives. I don't know how much any of us are interacting with pyramids or specifically. The The first thing that I'm noticing here is that it's just a very balanced, kind of makes you feel happy in a way kind of piece, despite the variation throughout the entire thing. When I look at this piece, I don't really think there's a clear message, but I do think it puts the principles of art and design together very well. If I had to force myself to interpret a message from this piece, it would be something along the lines of, even if you're living your life the same way, you can still have variation to it. Don't let yourself be bored. You can see that because there's 6 identical modules, each with little variations of how they're attached to each other, little variations in what triangle is attached where, etc. And that would be the message I get from that. Now, before I go into the elements and principles of design, I want to talk about a few small craft issues and also what was done well in this piece. If we look in some specific areas, like right here, here, and also here, different little errors are evident in different views of this. We can see a few just slight craft errors. First of all, chunks of glue don't really help this piece. I think maybe the artist might have explored other materials that they could have used here to connect these pieces, but they settled on glue because it was what was working for them. I don't know if that contributed in the end, but it's what they chose. There's also some slight areas of disconnect, or where they maybe changed how they were doing this. It looks like on the pink section, they had one big triangle compared to some of these other ones where they had single triangles attached. Now, on to the elements and principles of design. There's amazing use of line. There's great use of line in these shapes and forms. There's so many lines jotted off in so many different directions. It helps with the overall abstractness of the shape. Can I really call it shape? Yeah, never mind. It has a great form, great mass, great repetition with variation. That's the probably biggest principle of design that we see here. It's very balanced despite its contrast. And we're kind of moving from piece to piece here. That was really well done. The use of color is great. That doesn't detract from the piece, it only adds to it. I like that the red and pink modules are in the middle and it kind of branches out like attachments to each one. That's something I think is well done. There's not really any texture in this one outside of the wood and maybe the paper, but I think that's okay. Overall, I think this person did a great job. I would give this piece a probably 9 out of 10 for overall composition, but unfortunately, I think the craft kind of draws it down just a little bit. So overall, let's say 7.5 out of 10. If this person was to ever try this again, I think changing how you do this, just perfecting the method a little bit more now that they've attempted this, would probably allow them to create a perfect piece. Overall, great attempt. Nice job to this person.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why that wasn't. That was kind of an odd thing to have just show up. I wanted to talk about a couple of the things that I thought Camden did really well, and then and just talk about it in general. One element that I thought was interesting is that most people who have done the critiques go right down the order of the questions, whether or not they state what those different points are, which are describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. Camden did separate evaluate, did that at the very end. But then he also, a final evaluation. But one thing that I thought was interesting is throughout, rather than sticking to those 4 steps, he would talk about an area, describe the area. Well, he began by describing the overall thing, and then he would go into different particulars and use those different tools uh, as he focused on particulars or particular areas. Like, for example, when he talked about how it was put together, he gave very specific examples of um, using the glue, good examples and bad examples. And then he also talked about different areas. He was talking about the pinks, he was talking about the reds. And I thought that that was kind of interesting. And one thing that I really did appreciate is using the principles of design as kind of a ladder or a framework to discuss a little bit more closely in different parts of it. So I thought that was really interesting. It did throw me off a little bit because he seemed to jump around a bit, but I think it worked, and it was just a way. Everybody's a little bit different. It wasn't good or bad, but I thought it was interesting, and his presentation was engaging. I thought overall I did a pretty good job. He is kind of harsh on himself, and that's something that um, all of us will do. I mean, we are always going to be our own worst critics, and so I think that he overall did a pretty good job. And I'm going to set up the next one. This is a little bit long. That's one thing that I appreciate about Camden's approach is that he took the time to discuss the different elements in more detail with a bit more precision. And I thought that was really nice too. Okay, I'm going to share this, and then we're going to watch this one. Okay, this is a peer critique.
My name is Camden, and today I'm going to be critiquing this piece by Maggie Rodriguez. There are a few things that I'd like to point out, but first I'm going to show you the 4 pictures that she took of her structure here. All right, now I am going to go back to the first one because I think this is the best angle for us to critique. First of all, looking at this piece, I just want to point out how incredible the craft is, especially for how small this piece is. The artist did a fantastic job. Specifically, this reminds me of kind of Greek buildings, especially with the color scheme. It's very beautiful. I think scale is done incredibly well here. There's great use of line. There's great use of forms. I can barely even tell how specific portions of this were made because it must have been done on the inside. It's just extremely well crafted. I think this piece is definitely representational of a house. That should be relatively obvious. The blue and white contrast each other nicely. The texture remains pretty consistent. The blue definitely brings out the paper texture just a little bit more than the white one does. But overall, I think they're the same texture. A few of the the elements and principles of design that I'd like to point out that are done extremely well here. And I've already kind of talked about these two. Line and color are done extremely well here. There's great visual balance in this piece. The weight of the house, I think the second piece shows this off. Sorry. The weight of the house is split relatively evenly between these two sides, despite them being functionally completely different. I think it's done very well. There's great focal points with these geometric structures that are up top of both the roof here and almost as a dome poking out on top of these 3 arches. There's great use of repetition with each of these windows. There's 3 windows visible here. I believe it's a total of either 6 or 8 windows. I'm going to say 8 windows. Great repetition. They're all the same shape. They are all consistent in how they're made. There's also, sorry, I just coughed. I had to mute the microphone. I think each of these pictures, because these pictures are also a big part of this assignment, they show off scale really, really well. Specifically this one, even with the little car, it just shows how much intricate little detail went into this work. Now, what I'm thinking the artist is trying to say here is this is maybe inspired by somewhere they want to go, somewhere they've been, or somewhere they have lived. Again, we can't be 100% sure, but I do think it was done really well, and I give props to the artist. I think this piece is really well done. I know I've said that several times, but congratulations to this artist for making a piece that succeeds. If I had to change one thing, and again, this is probably me being just a little bit picky, I think all of these pieces, or all of their photographs, focus just maybe a little bit too much on scale, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because they all show different angles, different parts of the piece, and they highlight it well. I think maybe just showing some sort of contrast with the background, aside from the second photo with the trees, might have helped this piece succeed just a little bit more in the photographs, take it from like a 99% to 100. But again, that's just me being picky. Congratulations to the artist, and nice job.
Oh, hey, Sylvia.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
No, that's no problem at all. How much of that did you see?
Just the very, very end.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to force you to watch it again, but my computer has been acting kind of odd where I have this lag with my mouse and clicking and things like that. I don't know how to fix it. So I was whining. So you missed my tirade and rant and whine about that.
Mhm.
But these are two critiques that Camden had done, self and a peer. And then this is what, of course, was his peer critique. One thing that I noticed about his critiques is, and this second one did the same kind of thing, where he bounced around quite a bit. Most everybody else went through the 4 steps in order: the describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And Camden is a little bit like me, where he's jumping around like a mouse on caffeine, and which I don't think is a bad thing. It gives a lot of energy to it, but it does force the viewer to really pay attention to what he's saying, so you can stay focused on the different elements that he returns to. Evidently, he really liked what Maggie did with her craftsmanship, because he mentioned that several times, and I think it was completely valid observation. And the critique itself, it did cover each of those 4 steps. It was just a little bit energetic because it bounced from one to another and back and forth and around, instead of going, starting at one and then transitioning to each. Another thing that I really appreciate about what he did was using specifically the principles of design to help describe and to help him discuss what he saw, which was talking about the rhythm the artist developed and the contrast and different things like that, the line use. I thought that was really good. As well, that I think is interesting is, you remember most of the other ones that we saw, Sylvia, people would like do a little bit of extra research and talk about how it was personally impactful to them, or they'd find points of resonance with what they saw. And what Camden did was he kind of evaluated on a scale of 1 to 10, and then talk about what he thought was exceptional, and then add like something that he might want to change, which I think is really kind of interesting too. I don't have a problem with that. Now, the tail end, I don't know how much you saw. Did you see enough to give any sort of an opinion, or to build any sort of an opinion about what you saw?
Yeah, the very end of it that I saw was when he was kind of bouncing through some of the photos that had been submitted, and just mentioning that the photos kind of focused more on scale.
Uh-huh.
And so he had mentioned that he would want to have seen a little bit more contrast in it. And I think like with that, it could have been maybe like with just like a filter or something, that it could have, with the photo editing after the photo had been taken, it could have added a little contrast to it. But that was just the very, very end that I saw.
Yeah, and I think that would be kind of interesting too. And I really like that point. The assignment was to submit 5 photos of your house in different positions or perspectives. And I thought it was interesting he pointed that out, where he was looking not just at the images of the house being the house portrayed differently, but the visual impact of each image, talking about the contrast. So he was actually discussing the visual image as an art piece itself. And I thought that was kind of interesting, because I hadn't thought about that before. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that is really interesting. Well, I'm really surprised that you're here. I'm glad that you are, Sylvia. I expected that nobody would be here, because I just decided yesterday that it would be really nasty to make everybody show up while it's a holiday. But what I wanted to do was go over a couple things. One person did turn in their final sculpture revisited, and I think that this one turned out really good. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the wrapping things and other things that have been turned in. Right, as of right now, everything but the wrapping stuff has been graded, and the wrapping stuff has been mostly graded. And I wanted to iterate that when you turn this assignment in, I try really hard to grade for the parameters of that assignment. So when you turn in your work log, you're graded for doing the work log, not for the hours spent doing the work log or doing the work. And when you are graded for submitting something for the discussion, you're graded on submitting for the discussion, not what you submitted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I don't want anybody to be upset that, well, I got a perfect score on the discussion, but you said that my piece was really nasty. And I haven't said that about anybody's. But if you get 5 points for submitting something on the discussion board, it's because you submitted something, not because the pieces that isn't a validation of the piece itself. And then I also, and we'll talk about a couple other things. But if that's okay with you, one thing I wanted to do really quick here is I want to share a page. And you notice that there is a little bit of a lag, and I don't understand why I don't understand the reason for the lag. But we're going to do the best we can. All right. Now this is something that just showed up in everybody's, the last module, the final module, talks about the student SRI. Do not tell me what you have written in the student SRI. That's not the important thing. For this assignment, what you need to do is submit a screenshot of your receipt for doing the student SRI. And that screenshot means a 2% boost to your final grade, whatever your percentage on your final grade is. And that usually represents almost a half letter. Half letter is usually about 3 to 4 points, and that 2% can really help if you're on the edge of A minus trying to get an A. Now, I cannot show you what the student portal looks like because I don't have access to a student portal. But if you go to your main My UVU page, I believe that the link to the SRI is at the top right. And that should be open for people to start doing. When you do that, after you're all done, take a screenshot of the final page, which will show you that you've done it. It's the receipt for that final, or it's the page that has the visual receipt or confirmation that you did the student SRI, and then you submit that. You don't get any points for it. There's no points, but it will be marked down, and you will get, as it says right here, a 2% increase on your the final point value for your grade. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
I didn't know that you could access it from the page. I usually just access them when they get emailed to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Last year we started having a problem that not everybody was getting the emails.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I found out that you could access it from the page. And it is the My UVU student portal page. You can access that. What I would like to do, I'm going to see if anybody has a video, or if one of you guys want me to staple a gold star to the center of your forehead, you could video yourself tracking that down and finding it. And that would be a great thing for the class. I won't give you any points for it, but God and the angels will be happy for you.
Okay.
And take that for what it's worth. But and this, anybody in the class, if you want to film yourself accessing it, that's great. But if you are not getting the email for it, and everybody should be getting an email for all the classes that they're registered for, if you don't get the email, the access should be on your My UVU student portal page. So, and I'm hoping that that is still the case. If you do not find access to that by next week, I would call student tech support and ask them to guide you through it, and that will take care of it. Okay, I'm going to go through and look at the different things that I have keyed up. When I just now did stop sharing, it was interesting because my whole screen blacked out. So my computer evidently is having a little bit of a difficult time today. And I wanted to also mention a couple things. There are 3 of the discussions in the class that require you to write down partial critiques on 3 other students. We'll get to that in just a moment and talk about that. One of the things that is can be a little bit difficult is most of the time there's a couple of people that turn in their images first, and there's simply not enough people that have turned in images in order to do the critique portion of that discussion. So in that case, you may get half points, and the only reason you have half points is because there aren't nobody else has turned in stuff to finish for you to be able to write critiques on their student work. I mentioned, and I have mentioned several times, that you need to email me when you add to a discussion. You need to email me when you add to a discussion, because that is something else that we're trying to figure out technical wise, and I don't know why. The discussions are supposed to alert me when people add to them, and I have triggered all the right things, but it is not alerting me. So when you add to a discussion, and even when you submit something, please email me and let me know that you worked on it so that I can go back and adjust the grade, because that doesn't always happen. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second here. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, this is the Mighty Voltron Sculpture Revisited Texture and Light. So this is, somebody had the base, they did their sculpture, they did all that stuff, adding color and texture like they're supposed to. This cannot be turned in until after the first, you have submitted your cubes. Hopefully that it's obvious as to why, because the texture and color work that you did on the cubes will inform what you do on this. But this is a discussion entry, and the two parts of the discussion entry for this particular assignment is, first, you submit your photo, and then you write a short critique, and there's directions in that, short critique on the works of 3 other students. Now, Margaret has not submitted those 3 critiques because she's the only one that has submitted an image so far. So for this, she's only gotten half credit for the discussion. Does that make sense as to why?
Mm-hmm. Because it's technically half done, since the 3 critiques need to be done.
Right, exactly. And I wanted to talk about this piece in particular and why I do appreciate it. What are some of the things that you notice that are going on, Sylvia, on this piece?
There's a lot of different texture with like the feathers versus the yarn versus what looks like felt, and then the beads. And then there's a bunch of different colors with it almost being like complementary colors, with the orange reddish color of the pom-poms, with the base being a blue, as well as like there's the reddish pink color with some of that like aqua, almost green yarn. And so there's a lot of like contrast in regards to like the color, with some of them being complementary, as well as the textures of like the hardness of the beads and the smallness of them versus the softness of the yarn and the feathers and how big those are.
Yeah, well, first off, you could not see me nodding in agreement with that as you were talking. Second, what I'm impressed by is, as you're talking about this, you are using precise language, like we've been speaking about from the beginning of the term. You know, using precise language rather than saying, "Oh, that's neat," or "Oh, that's colorful." You spoke directly to each of the textures you saw, each of the colors you saw, where they were, and all that kind of stuff. And I really appreciate your precision of language. Some of the things that I really appreciate about this is it looks like she spent a lot of energy putting this together. I don't know if you remember, I told you about some of the really sad attempts that people made on these things that were, I hardly qualify as attempts, because like one person just draped strips of masking tape over what they made. And since this class is about 3D design, we really need to work on the elements of 3D design. And towards the tail end of the term, we started talking about color and texture. So that really needs to be evident. Sylvia, can you put a number at all on the different textures, the number of textures that you see?
Let's see. Well, I mean, there's different textures even within the yarn. Like there's ones that have the looping of like the aqua green colored versus like the almost pom-pom looking ones that are the orange ones.
Uh-huh.
So like there's 2 completely different textures even with it's the same material. And then there's like different kinds of beads as well. Like it's not all the same bead. Like the yellowy gold ones are very, very short and small and round versus the tall round ones on the top that are blue versus the little orange ones that have multiple sides on them. And then like there's also the other blue ones that are further down that are also very short. And then like the different felt that has like very rectangular bluish felt that's all kind of squished together. And then the pink one on the end that is more flat, but it has like the edges being kind of rounded. And then like the different feathers. And I mean, like even that little fur on the very bottom of it, that's something that I didn't see at first. But that has different texture there. And then I guess even like the paint with how it's not just one solid color, like the complementary of like that object on top of the base. The base is a different color than the object itself. And so the different texture within that object having like the blue and the pink and the orange and the red and just all that. There's so many different textures. So I don't even know how many.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to put a number on them. And like this base is primarily blue with little spots of pink and orange and red there. And then this fan form is predominantly pink and orange and red with a little bit of blue. They tie in, they talk to each other, they belong to each other. The textures, the colors in each of the textures kind of make your eye bounce around.
Yeah.
Overall, do you think that this is a successful example of this assignment?
Yeah, I think it is a very successful example of the assignment just because it's very complementary and where there's a lot of opposites, but it does it in such a way that it pulls it together so it looks like a solid, cohesive piece.
Yeah, there's a lot of color going on. But the color all fits. You know, she's using two different color schemes at the same time. There's a lot of texture going on, but all the texture fits because it ties together because of the use of color. And the color use ties in with the texture as well. Like you were talking about just the texture of the application of the color. We get this pink and red feathering up here, and this teal or blue feathering over here. And then you get right next to that, and underneath it, this faux fur down here, and the actual feathers right here, where the application of the paint and the texture itself kind of talk to each other and complement each other. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about it, because Margaret was able to really consciously use those textures and colors so that your eyes are entertained. I don't know how else better to describe it, but the patient observer is rewarded, because you constantly see new things. Like you were talking about seeing new textures as you were describing the one recognized. But then your eye wants to keep going to different places, and it's not because it's confused, but because your eyes are almost getting excited saying, oh, I want to go here, I want to go here, I want to go here. And I think that this is a really good example, and I'm so glad that Margaret was the one that did it first. It's really sad when the first one sucks. I'm really glad that this one does not suck. This is successful, and I really appreciate how you're able to precisely describe exactly why it's successful. But it fits the parameters of the assignment, and Margaret is really showing off what she learned doing the color and texture cubes. And then we talked about the biomorphic. You can see the biomorphic form there. This feels to me, even though there's feathers and fur and other stuff, this feels to me like something that I would want to see if I went diving on a coral reef. That's the kind of thing that I get. It feels organic. It feels biomorphic, even the textures, the use of textures. So I think this is successful. Well, and that I think that's a really positive light, but I hope that everybody gets a better understanding of what that final assignment is about. And this is why I want you to spend time on it. Margaret did spend a lot of time on this, going back and forth, dealing with different issues, working on bits here, working on bits there. And I want you to sit down and work on this for a couple hours, go away, do something else, then come back to it. You know, and this is also, the next couple of weeks are also the time for everybody to finalize their annotated bibliography and finish up their PowerPoint, if you haven't finished that already, as well as the peer reviews and the peer and self, not peer reviews, but the peer critique and the self-critique. And again, the peer critique and the self-critique are for absolutely everybody to do. The annotated bibliography and the PowerPoint are only for the research people. And I think, Sylvia, you are doing the service learning project. So the service learning exercises are only for the people doing the service learning. So, you know, that's where things separate a little bit, but everybody needs to do the peer and self-critique. So get those done as soon as you can. And like I said, I will be staying on top of the grading, making sure that it's all taken care of so you can go back and revisit stuff and return things in as quick as you need to, or as quick as you can. Now, I wanted to go through the ready-mades, and Sylvia, you were here last time.
I watched the recording.
Okay, you
watched last time.
Okay, whatever. I don't want to really touch on necessarily things that we've already looked at. However, and I just want to go through them fairly quickly, with one exception. Let's see. I want to show you guys what our resubmission looks like. This one, this is from Whitley. When she first turned it in, there was a really disconcerting shape over here. It wasn't cropped really well. Didn't look it didn't look as professionally photographed as it could have. And what Whitley did is she just revamped it, recropped it, and turned it in again. And I think that this looks significantly better. It looks like a finished photo now. And that's exactly what we're hoping for. Do you, Sylvia, do you remember what the earlier submission looks like that Whitley turned in?
Yeah, a little, like I can remember there was a little bit to it that is not there now. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think this one's very finished. It looks like something that could go in a gallery.
Yeah, it looks a lot better. And that just required a little bit of cropping. And then this one, I think we've already looked at this one. Sometimes photographing things can be a little bit tricky. This person solved a lot of the problems by, they had a box and they put a towel over it for the base. And I think that turned out pretty well. There are, if we do come across one that I'm not really ecstatic about, I'll say something. I think this one, this photographer, or this person set up something that reminds me very much like a Man Ray style photograph. He was really active, 1920, 1950, did a lot of kind of surrealist stuff. And this is one of the new ones that, Sylvia, I don't think you've seen before.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one.
Well, there are a couple of things about this that I think are absolutely spectacular. And there is one thing that I would really like to change. One is the person essentially made their own pedestal. And everything else is black and white, but the Campbell's label is this almost metallic red. And I think this is beautiful. You know, visually, I think that this is really wonderfully done.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I would recommend changing for this person is doing something to remove this background. Because this kind of thing, you know, the plant on the side, or it looks like a step ladder or whatever, those are all distracting. And I would recommend putting a dark color sheet behind it, and and rephotographing it in front of that, on that pedestal, in front of a dark colored sheet. And then when you bring it, work with the contrast like they did here, that'll turn the background black. And I think that would make this perfect. I think. It would really make this that top notch. What do you think about this one, Sylvia?
I really like this one, especially with like the dent at the bottom of it, where it just kind of takes like that, because like the way that it looks with like that deep red color versus everything else is black and white, it really draws your attention in. I actually do like how there has like the little plants in the right photo, kind of leading your eye from like the corner into the Campbell's soup can. Um, but in the left photo, the like little like the metal bars and stuff kind of distract me a little bit, but I kind of actually really like the right one.
Okay.
But I do like the black and white, except for the Campbell's soup can. It reminds me of, I don't remember what piece it was, but there was one with like a Campbell's soup can, and it reminds me of that piece.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Andy Warhol's silk screens.
yeah, but I really like it, and I like how it's bent and dented, just because it's like, I don't know, it makes it look more realistic and more, oh, what's the word? Relatable, I guess, in a way.
Well, and Emily, in her write up about it, she had ordered food from Walmart, ordered groceries, and this was the can of soup that she got in her order. If I was her, I'd be really upset.
Yeah.
But it's obvious that whoever packed the order realized nobody else would buy the can, and so they just put it in. And I thought that's not what you do. You know,
Yeah.
that kind of, I found myself commiserating with her over that. So let's see. I think this has the title "Botulism, Not the Fun Kind" is the title of this, and I really like that nod to Andy Warhol in this particular. I think that turned out really well. And in this case, if Emily agrees with what you were saying and likes that background, I think that the plant would work if the rest of the background didn't have all this stuff going on. I think that's what I'm responding to. And if this wasn't evident, maybe this wouldn't bother me as much. You know what I mean? Because this is really distracting.
Yeah, it's just the left one just kind of pulls your eye away from the right one, but
Yeah.
I definitely like how the plant is almost the same shade as the pedestal that it's on.
Yeah. And I think perhaps if, this form and these things were removed like that, then the plant, I think, would be viable. But, something for her to think about. And my mouse is just frozen up again. Get it to work. Okay, here we go. There we go. Now this is another one. I think that this one initially, when I looked at it, I thought it was the same kind of thing going on. That the background was disappointingly distracting. But then I looked at the write-up and I looked at the title, The Divider. Now, Camden has done a similar thing to Emily, where he's turned it black and white with the only color being in that central object. But then I thought, having this background, it's not as frustrating as the other one because it's not as big of a jumpy contrast. But the thing that really sells it to me is the title. Because the background feels like a divider between, this dividing space between rooms, as opposed to just a sloppy background. And it fits with the theme of this thing, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think because there's not as much contrast in the background, and the fact that the background is almost like slightly blurry,
Yeah.
it feels like the background is divided away from the object as well. Because there's also like a line almost about that midway point going across
Right here?
horizontally. And it almost seems like there is actually a divider between the object and the background to make that background blurry. And so I like how the object itself is the divider, but also it's divided away from the background with the color
Yeah.
contrast.
And that's fun for me because, again, it engages the viewer. It engages your eyes. Your eyes have things to do, and you have stuff to think about as you're looking at it. So I really appreciate that. I think that was, I am going to assume that all of that was on purpose on the part of Camden. I prefer to believe that. But one thing that I am noticing is, as you guys are submitting the photos, it would be super fun just to have an exhibit on campus where we blow these all up to like maybe 18 by 24 inches and have a display just of these photos.
That would be cool.
That would be really cool. That'd be a lot of fun. And I believe that we did see this one before.
Mhm.
That one, okay. And we did see this one before as well. The brush. This reminds me of Marcel Duchamp's In Advance of a Broken Arm. We did the same kind of thing with the snow shovel.
Mhm.
And I kind of like that nod. Just like that Campbell soup can reminds us of Andy Warhol, your
Mhm.
piece reminded me of Marcel Duchamp. I thought that was nice. Now, this one, I think we may have seen it last time, but there's something that I wanted to touch on. Remember, we looked at Whitley's, and just by cropping it, it elevated it so much. I
Mhm.
think this one would benefit the same way. I think if it was cropped down here, so we get rid of this dark triangle, and it was cropped on the same space over here, and then cropped along the bottom right here, so we got rid of this hem, I think this would be 100% better. Just a little bit of cropping. One thing that I really love about this is you're looking at it, it looks like a black rock. You really have to pay attention, and then you see, oh, that's the rolling wheel. And then it dawns on you what it is. And I think this is really well done. So I would recommend to Lexi to crop this down to about right here, crop it down over here so that the outside edge to the end side of the mouse is the same on either side. And I would crop the bottom off to get rid of this hem. And I think that would make it just 100% better. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think because with it being so dark, having the corners on either side be a little bit darker, it kind of draws your eye away since the pedestal has those lines kind of leading down towards it. So if it
Yeah.
was cropped in that way, it would allow for the viewer to really focus in on the mouse.
Yes, I think so. And I think that would make it better, I think. So yeah, very much. Now, this is something that um, is an artifact, I think, of Canvas a little bit. And my mouse froze again. Sometimes when you submit something, you should always double check your submissions. In this case, the submission moved the photo at right angle, rotated it. And I think that this one is really nice. However, I would make a couple changes, and I think it would just be a presentation of the photo. I think I thought that this was a ground level here, but I think it is a wall, and that's why Sadie had to hold it. And what I would recommend, and this is my thought about it, is I would hold the Lego flower right up against the wall, but I would hold it right down here. So, and then when they photograph it again, crop your fingers out.
Mhm.
And I think I don't mind the shadow against the wall. I think that would be just fine. But then also, Sadie, when you resubmit the photo, double check and make sure that it's rotated it the right way. And there are guides that you can find on YouTube that are pretty easy to make sure that it rotates it in the right direction. But that's what I would recommend for that. So very simple, again, a very simple fix. And when you're photographing, just in general, pay attention to the shadows, because sometimes that really can benefit or detract from the overall thing. I think that the wall texture benefits this because that wall texture kind of reminds me of the ground, but because it's painted, and I'll zoom in on the texture a bit so you can see what I'm talking about. Hopefully, yeah. Because it's a little bit glossy and painted, it feels slightly industrial. It doesn't feel like the earth or the ground. And I think that it is a really nice kind of counterpoint to the Lego flower, because the Lego flower also feels kind of mechanistic and industrial. So, I think this kind of is a little bit of a mechanical or industrial take on the gardening ground, like the flower might grow out of, but it's a particular take on that ground as a Lego, reminding me or making me think of perhaps this is the particular kind of weird ground that a Lego flower grows out of. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
It pulls it away from completely natural. But I think that if Sadie is able to do that, hold the flower right at the very tip, photograph this, and then crop her hand out of it entirely, I think that would really make this work really well as a finished photo piece. I think that would really be nice. What do you think, Sylvia?
Yeah, I agree. The hand kind of distracts just ever so slightly, but I think if you were to crop it out by holding it by the base of the flower, then that would help because the shadow, with the fact that the wall has that texture, it gives texture to the shadow, which
Right.
it does a really nice contrast in comparison to like how smooth the Lego is. And so I think that contrast with the texture in the shadow and then the Lego flower, if that was all that was in the photo, that would look really nice.
Yeah, I think so. And if Sadie feels it's really important to have a hand in there, I would use a drawing mannequin hand as opposed to a human hand.
Mhm.
And I think that would tie in really well. I'm sorry, I don't know why the photo is not showing up again. Again, weirdness with the computer. And we did see this missile. I think this is beautifully photographed. I can't complain about it. I think that turned out really well.
Yeah.
And it looks like, what is fascinating to me is most of the time when we see a pedestal like that, we are trained to believe that it's about between 32 and 38 inches tall, which gives this a completely different scale.
Mhm.
That's not accurate at all, but I like that because it kind of pushes us away even further from how you typically see a dart.
Yeah.
So that was really well done. Now in this one, we haven't seen this one before. This is one that I think is really well done, except for these black triangles. And I think that Yasmin, if she could crop this out, keeping this the center, I wouldn't crop any off the bottom, but I would crop off the edge, like right up here, go over and crop down like that to get rid of these two black triangles. Because for me, I really like the background. I love the texture of the background against that smooth pillar of this diffuser. But those two dark triangles, I think, distract from the effectiveness of the photo in this particular instance. What do you think? Do you like that background, that kind of cloth background?
I do like the texture of the background because it definitely contrasts with the smoothness of the spray mister thing. But yeah, with the background being like behind the texture being black, it just kind of like makes it look very, very flat and then a lot of texture and then back into the mister.
So it becomes a little disconcerting.
Yeah,
Well,
just a little bit.
with the title Beauty in a Mist, and looking at this, in my mind, there's a very significant connection with the Birth of Venus, the very famous Renaissance painting where Venus is coming out of a shell, a scallop shell in the ocean. You know exactly which one I'm talking about, don't you?
Yep.
And I think that this background, this cloth background, is absolutely perfect for that. And I'm wondering if Yasmin thought that this scalloping kind of tied it in a little bit closer to that shell that Venus is sitting on, that's standing on. I don't think that this edge needs to be there though. And I do think that it detracts. I think that the beautiful folds that Yasmin has captured in this absolutely perfect piece of cloth, I think that's a good enough. I mean, that's a perfect tie-in. It doesn't need this edge. So I would recommend to Yasmin if she could just trim this down. You're still going to have almost all of that background. Make sure that this is centered side to side still, and take off just enough to get rid of these black triangles. Then I think it would be perfect. This would be another example that would fit really beautifully into an exhibit, a show of these. And then we're winding up with the same one that we started with, the phone. And I'm just really happy with what she did because it looks so much better than that first one. I'm going to stop the sharing. My screen went black again, but I'm working on getting that. I love computers. I think they do amazing things. It's just sometimes it's a little frustrating for me because it doesn't do what I expect it to do. Okay. Now I think that the last thing we are going to look at is the wrapped objects. And we've talked about this. I've gone on and on about, oh no, not the last. One of the last of the two things we're going to talk about are the wrapped objects. I also want to talk about the essay for this. Now I have had previous classes where people pulled names out of the textbook to write the essays on. The essays, if we look at the actual assignment, and I'm going to pull that up here really quick. Okay, getting up there pretty quick. I'm going to share my view and do this again and kind of walk through this a little bit. Most people are doing this pretty well, but there is a little bit of confusion. I wanted to make sure that we could get that cleared up. Okay, if you look at your assignments, you have the background right here, and the background gives you a list of several videos and stuff like that about the different artists. And I'm clicking on that. You should still be able to see this. I have some introductory videos about this, and then these numbers here refer to each of the artists. So this is Christo and Jean-Claude, and Tony Craig, Nick Cave, Tara Donovan, Yayoi Kusama, Lucy Barker, Federico Uribe, Jennifer Meister, Angelica Arendt, Ronaldo Dip, Pam Bowman, Janine Antoni, and Judith Scott. So there's 13 different artists to look at. And you can, when you do your essay, you're supposed to pick 2 of them. A few people picked artists that were not one of these 13. And I don't know where they got the other artist names from. It might be from some of these other videos. When we talk about this, and we talked about it at the beginning as well, at the very beginning of the term, your essays need to be about these artists that are in the list. And if there's any confusion at all about which artist you're focusing on, go back to the artist list that everybody had to look at to do that simple research thing. And I'm going to scroll up to here. So it's in Module 1, Module 7.A, and the artist list. We go here to the artist list. This gives you the list of artists from each of the modules. And then you also have artists that are good to know. But for each of the essays, you need to be focusing on the artists that are listed in the background for that module, and that's where you draw the artists from. So, and I didn't stress this an awful lot because this class, like most classes, everybody's been doing that. But in this most recent essay on contemporary process and conceptualism, when we do the artist review, you need to draw only from the background artists that are listed there. And there's been classes before where people just picked artists that were completely at random, and I had no idea where they got the names from, or they picked them out of the textbook. But as we talked about from the very beginning, those artists need to be from the background section for that particular module. Does that make sense, Sylvia?
Yeah, just because those are the artists that we're reading or looking at them from that background section.
Okay. And if you did turn in an essay and you got half points because you didn't use those artists, just rework it so you can have those artists in there, and then you'll get full points. So it's not a big deal. And I hope that makes sense to everybody, because each of the modules, there are specific artists to look at. Now, if I am a stinker and you did use one of those numbered artists, and I threw a fit anyway, let me know which number the artist is, and you'll get the points for it. But I had one person who got upset with me because we were talking specifically about sculpture, where the artist worked a lot with steel, stainless steel, things like that. And the artist he chose to write about was a skateboarder who did graffiti. And there are graffiti artists that you can use for your independent artist research, but not for any of the module essays, because first, they aren't in that background section where you have the artists that we talk about. And second, the majority of graffiti artists work 1D or 2D. They're painters, the majority of them. There are some exceptions to that, but that's one of the reasons. But the fact that they are predominantly 2D means that is one of the main reasons why they are not in any of the background lists of artists for each of the modules. So, he wanted to do it for his research project, and since the guy did not do 3D work, he wasn't able to. But I was able to help him find a 3D graffiti artist. There are a couple of animators and a couple other people that do 3D graffiti work, and he was able to do that. But so I am happy to work with people, but again, those essays need to be drawn from the artists that are listed in the background section for that particular module. All right, so hopefully that makes a lot of sense. I want to go to the next thing. This, and I'm thinking I graded these just looking at the object themselves, but I think I need to revisit these because of the way that some of them were photographed. So I may have to say something about that. Well, I will say something about that, and I'll go back. Now, hopefully you're seeing this. You can see this, Sylvia, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. This is one of two objects that was done. This person did two objects. The wrapped object, we talked about wrapping it so you can't recognize what it is. We talked about wrapping it so it's visually intriguing and interesting. And this one, I think, fits the parameters of the assignment because it's very difficult to tell what this thing is. And the person obviously spent a lot of energy wrapping this. The one thing I don't like is that this should be photographed without a confusing background and without a hand holding it. So I think I will have to go through and take off a point for that, but this person can easily, take another photograph and resubmit for that remaining point. But some of the things I like about this is the different ways it's wrapped. You have the different materials used. You have yarn, you have string, you have some other stuff. Instead of just doing this randomly, it looks like there's some areas that are very parallel, other areas that are crisscrossing, and then other areas that are very intentionally done from different directionals, where the string is wrapped from different directional standpoints. And I think that's very interesting because it looks intentional to me. I think that's it. What do you think of that?
I really like the ends where it has those, like, instead of it being the same way it's wrapped, it has like having like almost vertical and horizontal on the both of the ends and kind of diagonally as well. Because like the midsection, it'd be very hard to do that kind of different texture from the wrap, but I like how there's different colors throughout there, like with the red and white in the bottom, and then like a little hint of almost like a blue violet just right at that base of the top of it.
Like right here?
Yeah. So I think having the different color kind of allows for that same like difference and variance as like the top and the very bottom where it has the different angles that it was wrapped.
Yeah, and it makes it interesting for your eye to examine. I think it makes it fascinating because your eye is looking at this. Oh yeah, that's kind of cool. I like that. And then it's drawn over here. Here's some purple. But then you look at these lines. This stuff is going on. Here are the lines crisscross because of the texture of the string itself. So there's a lot of interesting things that kind of reward your eyes for looking through it. I think that's fascinating. Now, this is one that I think is really an interesting idea. There's a couple things that make it difficult for me to understand what's going on, and I hope we can get visuals back again. Okay. One thing is it's so dark that it's hard to see what's going on, and I think that this would really benefit from longer exposure. And your camera does have things where, or your phone does have things so you can take longer exposures to get more color. But one thing we talked about quite a bit is we're not talking about just laying stuff over, we're talking about actually wrapping it. And this looks to me like it's netting that is laid over something else. And so this doesn't really fit the parameters of the assignment. It's not a bad thing by itself, but it doesn't fit the assignment. What I would recommend for this person is, you see the red underneath here. It'd be really interesting to do something where they have something lighter colored wrapping around this object, putting the netting over it, and then tying the netting in place, just like Jean-Claude and Christo did. And, you know, if we look at that previous one, the whole thing has strings going everywhere, because that's part of what it is. It's all wrapped with the string. And this person does not need to do that because they have the netting there. But I think in order for this to fit the parameters of the assignment, it needs to feel like it's wrapped. So what I would do if I was them is take the netting, bring it in closer to the object itself, and then use a contrasting thing. Like if the netting is black, use a pale gray or pale color cord or string or several different kinds of ones to kind of tie it in strategic places to hold it in place. And I'm thinking specifically, remember like Jean-Claude and Christo would wrap objects like cars or the cliffs, they would draw out where the rope would go on it. And I think that that would be a really good solution. Maybe this person doesn't necessarily need to draw out where the rope would go, but I would say having a contrasting rope color, perhaps even the same color of whatever the material is underneath this netting, and then use that rope to strategically tie the netting in place and hold it in place so it feels like it's a wrapped object. And I think then it would fit the parameters of the assignment. So it wouldn't be a huge change, but it would be a significant enough change that would make it so it fits the assignment. What do you think, Sylvia?
I kind of like the netting, how it like doesn't go exactly on the shape of the object, just because it like helps with making it so that you don't, if it was wrapped underneath with different colors closely on like the roots and then had the netting laid over it just like it is now, I think that would help it stand out just a little bit so it doesn't blend in with the background. But I like how it's just kind of like laid over the top and it's kind of transparent so you can see underneath it. But I think if there was like that red cloth with maybe some other colors just wrapped around it and then the netting on top, I think I personally would like that if that would match the criteria. But yeah, I just like how the netting kind of like creates a new shape, but you can still see through it and you can see the object.
Well, I'm wondering, because it does need to feel that it's wrapped. So I'm wondering if they tied it so that maybe tying it like right here and right here and right here, so that the netting is attached specifically to this, but you still have some of that loopy transparency. I think that would work too.
Yeah, that would really be cool to have almost like that bubbling effect of like the netting bunching, but not being exactly tied to it, but only in certain places. That could be really cool.
Yeah, and then that would also fit the parameters of the actual wrapping. So that could work too. I think that's really, thank you for that. Now this is one that I thought was really, really intriguing. I don't know what I'm seeing here, and a big reason why I don't know what I'm seeing is because of the background that it's photographed on. I think that the first thing that I would recommend for this person to do is photograph this object on a white sheet instead of this gray. I like this. I really respond well to Persian and Turkish style design, and that's where this particular design comes from. There's a lot of acanthus and lotus in here, with several other flowers that are traditional for Islamic style design. But in contrast to this object, it really doesn't help at all. So I would recommend first that they rephotograph this object on white, but I really don't understand what is being wrapped and how it's being wrapped. I think it's a fascinating object, but I don't understand the correlation to the assignment. And I think that's a concern to me because it's a fascinating object. And again, this is one of those things where I talk about sometimes the grade does not come because of how cool the thing is, because I think that this is very cool. It comes because of the relationship of the submission to what the assignment parameters are. And the assignment parameters in this case are it needs to be wrapped. And so first I would like Emily to rephotograph this on a white pillowcase or a white sheet, something like that, so we can actually see what this object is. And then I'd also revisit the object and make sure that it fits, to the best of her understanding, the wrapped object parameters of the assignment. Because it looks to me like it is some sort of a cup or something like that that is wrapped with elements of matting or an old basket. And I just don't understand what this is. So that's the first thing I would recommend. Rephotograph it, and then I'll be able to see what it is. Now, if this was the thing that is kind of frustrating, if this is a piece just by itself, I think this piece by itself is really fascinating. But in this case, it does not fit the assignment. So I would recommend to Emily, rephotograph this object on a white sheet so I can see what it is. And then if you would like to explain to me what you're doing, I think that would really help me quite a bit. But I do think it's, visually it's really very interesting. Now, I think that this one has a lot of potential. This is just foil wrapped around that little dinosaur guy. But there are two things that I think need to happen. One is this needs to be photographed on a simpler background. We have the plugin right there and everything. The simplest way to fix the background, well, there's three things going on. One is that it's at right angles, so it's difficult to see. Second thing is the background. One of the simplest ways to fix that background, this object is small enough that you could take a piece of white tagboard and set it against the floor and allow it to curve up that edge against the wall, and then tape it to the wall so you get kind of an infinity curve going on, and then photograph the dinosaur in front of that, and that would remove all this background noise, because this makes it very difficult to see what it is when you have the carpet, cording, the plug-in, and the baseboard. So that would be the second thing that I would recommend. And then the third is, so the first is right angles, second is background. The third is, this is a really good start. But to fulfill the parameters of the assignment, go back and look at what Jean-Claude and Crystal were doing. Because what I think would really benefit with this is taking like yarn and string, a couple different kinds of that, and then doing some strategic wrapping. Just like Jean-Claude and Crystal did, wrapping the plastic around something, I think you could do a little bit of string around the head and neck area, contrasting with the foil, the aluminum foil. And I think you could do some really interesting stuff right here to kind of be aware, like maybe string going this way, string going this way, maybe a little bit of diagonal stuff going on, but making the string, applying the string so that it is intentional and interesting, just like Jean-Claude and Crystal did, where the rope becomes almost painterly lines applied to the object. And I think doing those three things would really make this work out. I know what this object is, and I think using foil is a brilliant way to start changing it with wrapping. But I think the thing that's missing is string to hold it in place. What do you think about this object, Sylvia?
I really like the use of the foil just because it gives it texture and it reflects the light in many different ways, since there's the different surface areas for it. But I do agree that if there was like a little bit more of a simpler background, just because it's a lot to look at with the carpet texture behind it.
Yeah, I really love the reflective quality of the aluminum foil on this, I think. But I definitely, this would fit better with the parameters of the assignment with a bit of string or yarn or different, or both, just in strategic areas to kind of hold or to feel like it's holding the aluminum foil in place. And I would definitely recommend And looking at Jean-Claude and Christo, some of the things that they wrap to see or to give you direction as to doing this. I do not think that this would benefit from wrapping it completely with yarn or string, because I agree with you completely that the texture of aluminum foil is very interesting. So I'm thinking where my mouse is, string around the neck and head a little bit, and then it gives you some intriguing areas that you can tie string around here, around the body. I think that would be really fascinating. Now, this is one that I think is another idea that it's a great start, but it does not fit. It doesn't feel like it really completes the parameters of the assignment. This is a little bit better background to photo. You know, the background is a lot simpler. I think this could benefit from draping a sheet over this, the plane that this glass is supported on as well. What I think that this is like a scarf or a crocheted runner wrapped around a bottle. But I think to fit more closely the parameters of the assignment, I would recommend doing the same kind of thing as I was talking about with the previous image. Look at Jean-Claude and Christo. Look at how they used different colors of string, different kinds of yarn, different stuff like that to make almost painterly strokes of their wrapping. Because I think that this would really benefit with wrapping back and forth down around the neck and this area, back and forth around here, crisscrossing through here quite a bit, and then tying through here, and would also make it intrinsically more stable. So it would feel like a finished piece. Right now, this feels like at any moment, this scarf would come undraped. And so I really don't feel that this fits the parameters of the assignment. I think it's interesting. I love the fact that they use a crocheted runner to wrap this with instead of any other material. I think what this definitely needs is some string or some yarn of contrasting or colors, or even kind of that paste white string that they use for packing, for wrapping, something like that because that would tie in with the label. I think anything like that would look good to finish this up, and I think that's what it feels like to me. It feels like it needs to be finished. So I would recommend those two things: draping this plane, the surface, with material like this. Take the photo with, so it's not so it's easier to see the object, and then tying the object with string or yarn to really make it feel completed. I think that's what's needed on this one. I think that this one is really interesting. I think that this is fascinating. A lot of saran wrap on this, and this reminds me of one of the examples we looked at was the ironing board and the iron with the wrapping, and I'm wondering, this I think is going in a really good direction, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. I wonder if something else could be done with the books. And it might be as simple as one of Jean-Claude and Christo's the early things that they did is they just did really simple wrappings of bottles and cans. And I wonder if leaving this the way it is, and then just using string to maybe do a line across here, a line across here, a line on this one, and then maybe some diagonal ones on this one, but just a few simple lines to make it more visually arresting and intriguing. But I think that this is not looking too bad. What do you think, Sylvia?
I like the use of like the cling wrap that was used for it. As I was looking at it, I do think that maybe like just like even if it's just one string that goes around the midsection of the books and just ties off just from the middle point, I think that might add a little bit of that interest for the wrap, but I really like how it looks because you can still see kind of the object, but you do see that it is fully wrapped.
Yeah, and one thing I really appreciate is that the bookshelf is made of books itself,
Mhm.
and you see that with that. Yeah, I agree. And it doesn't need very much, just a little bit. I think that would do it. This one I think is really interesting. Oh, Sylvia, do you see a black image as well? Or
Mhm.
no image, just a black square?
If you zoom out a little bit more, does it still stay
Oh,
black?
there
Or
we go.
oh,
Okay. Yeah, I just zoomed out just when you said that. So yes, that resulted. I think for me there's the one thing that I would probably address would be the way that this is photographed, because I think that this could be really, really interesting. I like how it's hanging from something. It's a really interesting way to photograph it. But this dark shadow on the bottom right, and this little thing over here kind of detracts from it. I love the countertop, but I'm wondering if this is one of those things where it could be rephotographed with a white sheet behind it or something like that. I think that would be really intriguing. But a couple of the things that I really like about this is this person is using three specifically different textures to wrap with this, and three very different ways of wrapping. Like you have the rope that's interspersed with, it looks like strips of this white cloth, and then the rope is very straightforward, but it interlaces quite a bit with the strips of the white cloth, and the white cloth feels like it's very chaotically done. But those blue strips with the stars on them feel like they're very intentionally laid down. They're all flat. Where the rope is going in and out of the white. The white feels like it's almost like torn sheets that are knotted together, like somebody was escaping from prison. And
mhm.
then you get the blue with the stars on it. It feels very intentional. And I think that it's intriguing to me, and it's visually very interesting to me because there's always something else to look at. And I think that that's fascinating. What do you think, Sylvia?
Yeah, I agree with the fact that like it's really cool how they got the rope kind of interspersed with the cloth. And the fact that it's like it looks like it's hanging just like suspended in midair. It
Yeah.
also just really like intrigues you and makes you want to unwrap it almost to see what's underneath, especially with like the little stars that kind of draw you in and guide you around the object.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Oh, and I didn't realize we are out of time. We looked at the, and I'm trying to try. I think we saw the rest of these last week, last time. I know we saw this one. I really intrigued by this one. And then let's see. Yeah, I think we've seen all the other ones. Okay, so that's good. All right. So Sylvia, I really appreciate you being here with me today and being able to talk with you about some of these things. I think they're really fascinating, but it helps quite a bit to be able to talk about uh, some of the elements of these objects that we're looking at, and hearing your input and your response to them as well. And it's interesting to me because we didn't agree all the time, and that's kind of the point. That's why you have a discussion. Of course, it feels very satisfying to have somebody agree with you all the time, but that wasn't the point. So I really appreciate you uh, throwing in and responding to these objects as well. I hope that in our discussion today, that final project in particular, and then the wrapping object, some of the other things have become more clear. If anybody has any more questions, please feel free to talk to me. I think we have 3 more times that we meet before the end of the term. And I hope, Sylvia, that you're with me next week. I'm going to be doing this in Oregon because we're going to be out of town. But I please remind me. I want to go over kind of what the final will be, and then we'll talk about, as people have turned things in and stuff like that as well. But Sylvia, do you have any last questions or anything?
My last question was just kind of, I think you answered it just now with the final, just because I saw the CRI receipt was marked in that final section. So I was just going to ask if that was the final or if there was something else.
No, that is not the final. I'm required, everybody in the department is required to do a final with their students. And the final is going to be a set of questions. And the way we'll do this, it's not a test. It's not going to be proctored. And I will talk about it more next week. I hope to be reminded of that promise. But there's going to be a series of questions that you will share. And what we'll do is the first day of finals, I will open it up and send everybody the questions then. And then you will have the whole week of finals to go through, answer the questions, and submit. And if you do it at the beginning and you miss anything, then I can you'll be graded immediately, and you can go back and adjust your answers and resubmit. So it's important that you do it just right at the beginning of finals.
Okay.
And that's essentially what the whole what the final for this class is, a series of questions that you're graded on. And then also I wanted to remind people to look through their grades, look through the stuff that they've turned in, and make sure that you get everything submitted as soon as you possibly can so we can get that taken care of. All right? And you have plenty of time to resubmit if you need to. So if there's nothing else, thank you very much, Sylvia, for coming in and joining us today. And I hope everybody, I hope I answered and addressed any questions that people have. And if there's anything that I missed, please email me and we will talk about it next week.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll see you later.
Yeah.